My son sneered before the lawyer even opened the binder. "Dad, don't embarrass yourself," he said. "You were her husband, not her bloodline." Across the table, my late wife's stepson nodded like he had already won. I sat there in my old gray blazer, still hearing my wife's voice in rooms she would never enter again. Her estate was worth $60 million. But that morning, they spoke about it like I had only come to collect a tip for being lonely beside her bed. Then the lawyer placed a blue binder on the table. On the cover, in my wife's handwriting, were 5 words. "Not for money, for memory." My son laughed under his breath. The lawyer opened it and said, "Mr. Jones inherits all." The room froze. Then he pulled out a sealed envelope. On it, my wife had written, "Open only if they humiliate Curtis. Welcome to Final Act Revenge. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Please take care of your health while you listen." Because my wife had not just left me her estate. She had left proof of who came for love and who came for papers. My name is Curtis Jones. I am 72 years old, American-Canadian by birth, and old enough to know that most families do not break in one loud moment. They crack quietly, a missed call, a bitter look across a dinner table, a child remembering your absence longer than your apology. Before Marla, I spent most of my life reading risk for other people. Cold chain logistics. That was my field, not glamorous, not dinner party work. I dealt with refrigerated warehouses, cross-border delivery contracts, medicine shipments, frozen food routes, driver schedules, insurance clauses, and the kind of fine print that only becomes important after something expensive goes wrong. Vermont, Ontario, New Hampshire, sometimes Michigan, sometimes upstate New York. I was never the loudest man in a room. I made a living noticing what loud men missed. That was how I met Marla Kingsley Jones. She was not the kind of woman people forgot. Even when she said very little, the room behaved like it had been inspected. Marla had built her money carefully. Medical real estate, cold storage equity, a family foundation that supported hospice care, and elderly patients who had nobody left to sit with them. People called her wealthy. I called her exact. She could look at a balance sheet and find the lie before the person telling it finished smiling. The first time we spoke, it was at a supply chain conference after a storm had exposed weaknesses in several medical storage contracts. Men in good suits were calling the situation unexpected. Marla looked bored. I said, "The contract was clean. The risk was hiding in the people pretending it was clean." She turned toward me. Then she smiled. Not politely, really. "Finally," she said. "A man who reads silence like a paragraph." That was Marla, sharp enough to frighten bankers, gentle enough to notice when a tired man had been standing too long. We did not fall in love like young people. No fireworks, no foolish promises under summer lights. We fell in love the way older people do, carefully, with both hands open, knowing life had already taken enough to make us cautious. I did not marry her estate. I married the woman who held my hand when I was too tired to pretend I was strong. But I need to be honest. Before Marla, I had already failed at one family. My first marriage ended badly, and my son, Nolan, paid for more of that failure than I wanted to admit. I sent money. I paid bills when I could. I told myself that meant I was helping. But money can cross a state line faster than a father can repair absence. Nolan grew up remembering empty chairs, missed weekends, and a mother who carried more than she should have. So when I married Marla, he saw a story that made sense to his pain. His father had left a hard life and found a rich woman. That was not the truth. But pain does not always want the truth. Sometimes it wants a villain it can recognize. Marla knew that about him. She never hated Nolan. She once told me, "A wounded child can become a cruel adult if nobody teaches him where to put the hurt." I should have listened harder. Then Marla got sick. Cancer does not care how much your estate is worth. It does not pause for foundations, board meetings, lake houses, or family names. It takes the strong woman who once made lawyers sweat and leaves her asking whether the blanket is too heavy. I sat with her through chemo. I wrote down medication times. I learned which tea she could keep down. I read to her when she could not sleep. On bad nights, I held the basin while her body punished her for trying to stay alive. Autumn Greer, one of her nurses, said something I never forgot. He never asks what she owns. He asks whether the blanket is too heavy. That was all I wanted to be. Useful. Present. There. Near the end, Marla took my hand and said, "Curtis, when I am gone, do not let them turn our marriage into a financial accident." I thought she was asking me to protect my heart. I did not know she had already built a binder to protect the truth. Marla's memorial dinner was held in a private room overlooking the water. She would have hated that. Not the water. She loved water. She would have hated the performance around grief. There were white candles, polished glasses, heavy napkins, and 6 forks at every place setting. I remember looking down and thinking grief had gotten formal. Her photograph stood at the front of the room. Marla, in a navy coat, one hand resting on the railing of the lake house porch. That picture was taken before the illness had made her smaller, before people began lowering their voices around her like she was already half gone. I wanted to sit near that photograph, not because I needed attention, because when you lose your wife, you reach for small things that still make sense. But the seating cards had already been placed. Warren Kingsley sat near the center. Nolan sat beside him. Sloane Kingsley sat across from them, looking uneasy, like she had been invited to a dinner and found herself inside a strategy meeting. My place card was 2 seats down from where a husband should have been. Not far enough for anyone to call it cruel, just far enough for everyone to understand. That was Warren's style. He did not slam doors. He adjusted rooms until you found yourself outside them. He stood to speak first. Marla believed in stewardship, he said, lifting his glass. She believed in legacy, continuity, and the responsibility of family. Family. That word moved through the room like a hand choosing who belonged. Then Nolan stood. My son looked good in a dark suit. Successful, if you did not know how much anger can press a man's shoulders backward and call itself confidence. He raised his glass. "To Marla," he said. "A woman who understood blood carries responsibility." Blood? There it was, not even hidden. A few people looked toward me, then quickly looked away. People do that when cruelty is polite enough to make them unsure whether to object. Warren placed a hand over his chest. "Curtis gave Mother comfort in her last years," he said. "For that, we are grateful." Comfort. That little word. A box small enough to put 15 years of marriage inside and close the lid. I set my glass down. Comfort is what people call love when they want to make it sound smaller. The room went quiet. Warren smiled, not kindly, professionally. "Of course, Curtis, no one is minimizing your role." That was another thing men like Warren do. They cut you, then call your bleeding an overreaction. Nolan leaned close to me when the room began talking again. "Don't turn this into your grief tour, Dad." I looked at my son. For a moment, I did not see the man insulting me. I saw the boy waiting on a porch years ago, backpack at his feet, trying not to look like he cared whether I arrived late. That memory took the anger out of me, for a second. Then he added, "Marla's family has to protect what she built." I said, "Marla and I built a life too." He laughed under his breath. "A life isn't an estate." Sloane heard that. Her eyes dropped to her plate. She was not like Warren, not fully. Sloane had loved Marla. I believed that. But love can be easily guided by the person holding the folder. Later, a young board member named Jillian Rowe came to my side. "Curtis," she said carefully, "will you still attend the foundation meeting next week?" "Why wouldn't I?" She hesitated. Before she could answer, Warren appeared beside us. "We're considering a transition committee," he said. "Just temporarily, until everything is settled." "Settled by who?" I asked. He smiled again. "The proper channels." Proper. Another velvet word with teeth behind it. That was when Sloane came over, nervous, twisting a ring on her finger. "Curtis," she said, "I'm sorry about the lake house access issue. Warren said it was temporary for inventory." I went still. What access issue? Her face changed. She realized she had stepped on something hidden. Warren's expression sharpened. Sloan. She looked at him, then back at me. I thought you knew. I did not. After dinner, as people praised Marla's generosity and quietly measured the room for inheritance, I walked outside for air. Through the open patio door, I heard Nolan say to Warren, "The old draft may still matter." Warren answered too low for me to catch the rest. But I heard enough. Old draft, lake house access, transition committee. They were not grieving. They were arranging. That night, I drove to the lake house. The road was dark, and the water looked black under the moon. Marla used to say the lake was honest, because it never pretended to be warmer than it was. I entered the code. Red light. I tried again. Red. The lock had been changed. I called the security company from the porch. The young man on the phone sounded uncomfortable. Access was updated under Warren Kingsley's authorization, sir. Authorization from what document? A pause. He was listed as Family Property Coordinator. Family Property Coordinator. I almost laughed. Marla had been dead a handful of days, and already her home had a title for the man taking inventory. Through the window, I could see her green reading chair, the blanket still folded over the arm, the place where she used to rest her tea. I put one hand on the glass, then my phone buzzed. A message from Sloan. Ask about the old draft before they use it against you. I stood outside the lake house with the wrong code in my hand and realized they had started dividing Marla's life before the lawyer had even opened her will. The porch light was still on. That bothered me most. A locked house should look closed, dark, final. But Marla's lake house looked alive from the outside, glowing softly against the water, as if she might open the door and ask why I had taken so long. I stood there with my hand on the glass and the wrong code still blinking red beside me. Behind the window was her green reading chair, the same blanket folded over the arm, the little table where she kept tea, tissues, and a stack of books she never finished because she liked the first chapters better than the endings. I tried the code one more time. Red. No mercy in a machine. My phone was still in my hand. Sloan's message on the screen. Ask about the old draft before they use it against you. Old draft. Those two words had teeth. I called the security company again and asked for the change record. The young man on the phone sounded like he had been trained to avoid lawsuits by being polite to everyone and useful to no one. I'm sorry, sir. I can only confirm the access update was requested by Warren Kingsley. On what authority? As Family Property Coordinator. There is no such title. A pause. I only read what's in the file, sir. That sentence told me everything and nothing. I hung up and took pictures. The keypad, the red light, the porch, the window. The moving boxes I could see inside near the hallway. On one box, written in black marker, were the words, Art Appraisal, Temporary Removal, Temporary. That word appears often when people are doing permanent things they are not ready to defend. I called Harlan Tate. He answered on the second ring. Not, hello, just my name. Curtis. That alone told me he had been expecting something. I'm at the lake house, I said. The code? Changed. He exhaled through his nose. Do not enter. I can't. Good. Do not argue with security. Do not touch the boxes if someone opens the door. Photograph everything visible from outside. Send it to me. You expected this? I expected patterns. There was Marla again, even in Harlan's voice. Patterns. She had always believed people revealed themselves in repetition before they revealed themselves in confession. I sent the photos. A minute later, Harlan said, Did you see any removal labels? One box says Art Appraisal. Another pause. Of course it does. What does that mean? It means someone is trying to make inventory sound responsible. I looked at the lake. The water was black and still. Marla told me not to let them turn our places into inventory. I know, Harlan said quietly. The way he said it made me look back at the house. You know? She wrote more than one instruction, Curtis. I closed my eyes. The wind moved across the porch and slid under my collar. For a second, I was not angry. I was tired in a way sleep could not fix. Then Nolan called. I almost did not answer. But grief makes a man foolishly hopeful. You keep thinking maybe this time the voice on the other end will be your child, not the wound wearing his clothes. I answered, "Dad, Warren said you're at the lake house. Warren seems to know a lot tonight. Don't make this awkward." I looked at the locked door. That house was mine and Marla's. It was hers before you. There it was, clean, practiced, a sentence borrowed from Warren and sharpened by Nolan's resentment. I said, "It was ours when she was cold at 3 in the morning and asked me to sit with her by that window." Nolan laughed once, not because it was funny, because he did not want it to hurt. "You always know how to turn your presence into proof." That stopped me, because I heard the old boy in it. The boy who wanted proof I loved him too. "Nolan, no, don't do that voice." "What voice?" "The soft one. The one you learned too late." I stood there, holding the phone, staring at a house my wife had loved and a door I could not open. "I was not a perfect father," I said. "Congratulations on noticing after marrying into $60 million. He ended the call. For a while, I did not move. That was the hardest thing about Nolan. He could be cruel and wounded in the same breath. He could be wrong about Marla and still find the place where I was guilty. A car pulled up behind me. For one foolish second, I thought it might be Warren coming to explain himself. It was not. A young woman stepped out carrying a clipboard and wearing a family office badge. She looked startled to see me. "Mr. Jones? Who sent you?" She glanced at the house. "I'm just here for preliminary cataloging." "Of what?" "Art, silver, personal effects. Mr. Kingsley said the estate needed preservation." "Preservation?" I said. She swallowed. "I don't make decisions, sir." "No, you only label them." She looked ashamed. "Good. Shame means some part of the conscience still answers when called." I asked her one question. "Were you told I had no access?" She did not answer. That answered. After she left, I stood on the porch a little longer. I thought of Marla's blanket inside. Her tea table, her green chair, the place where she once took my hand and said, "If I go first, don't let them turn our places into inventory." At the time, I thought she meant grief. Now, I knew she meant Warren. My phone buzzed again. A forwarded email from Sloan. No message this time, just a subject line. Draft amendment. For review before trustee meeting. Below it was a note from Warren to someone named Dalton Fay. "Keep this ready. If Curtis pushes back, we question influence." I stood outside that locked lake house, reading the message again, and realized Marla's estate was not being mourned. It was being hunted. By the next morning, the lake house was no longer just a locked door. It was evidence. I brought the photographs to Harlan Tate's office in a plain folder. The keypad, the porch, the moving boxes, the label that said Art Appraisal, Temporary Removal, and the email Sloan had forwarded to me. Draft amendment, for review before trustee meeting. Below it, Warren's line sat there like a fingerprint. "Keep this ready. If Curtis pushes back, we question influence." Harlan read it once, then again. He did not curse. Men like Harlan do not need to curse. They make silence do the work. Finally, he looked up and said, "They are moving faster than I hoped." That does not sound comforting. It was not meant to. The meeting began at 10. Same long table, same polished chairs, same expensive quiet. Only this time, I did not feel like a grieving husband invited to listen. I felt like a man walking into a room where people had already chosen the shape of the knife. Nolan sat with his arms crossed, jaw tight, refusing to look at me. Warren sat beside him, calm as a man reading weather reports. Sloan sat farther away than before. Her face was pale. She had helped me, but helping someone secretly is not the same as feeling safe in the room afterward. Dalton Fay arrived last. He was thin, tidy, and carried a leather briefcase that looked older than some marriages. Family Office Controller, that was his title. I had met him only twice before, both times at foundation events where he spoke mostly in numbers and never finished a dessert. He nodded to me. "Mr. Jones." "Dalton." No warmth, no hostility, just two men aware that paper can bleed if opened correctly. Harlan sat at the head of the table. "The purpose of today's meeting is to clarify the estate instrument signed by Mrs. Kingsley Jones and address documents recently circulated outside this office." Warren leaned back slightly. "I appreciate the careful wording." Harlan looked at him. "You will appreciate it more if you answer carefully, too." Nolan scoffed. "Are we pretending Dad didn't control everything at the end?" I turned toward him. "Nolan? No. Let's say it. He was alone with her. He decided who could come. He decided when she was too tired. And now, somehow, he inherits everything?" Warren placed a folder on the table. "This is not personal anger. There are legitimate concerns. When a man says something is not personal, listen closely. He is usually about to make it personal with better grammar." Warren slid the folder forward. "A prior draft amendment from Marla's planning materials." Harlan did not touch it right away. "What does it purport to say?" Warren answered smoothly. "That Marla was considering a different structure. Kingsley family assets to remain under a transition committee. The lake house preserved for family use. Curtis provided for generously, of course, through a lifetime care allowance." A care allowance. That phrase made me feel smaller than any insult Nolan had thrown. 15 years of marriage reduced to a stipend. Nolan pointed at the folder. "There it is. She changed her mind before he got to her." Something in me snapped, not loudly, deeply. I leaned forward and said, "Do not put words in my wife's mouth because she is no longer here to spit them back." The room froze. Even Nolan looked startled. Good. There are moments when calm becomes a coffin. You either break it open or let them bury you inside it. Harlan finally opened the folder. He scanned the first page, then the second. His face did not change, but his fingers slowed. "Dalton," he said, "where did this come from?" Dalton folded his hands. "It was archived among family office planning materials." "Who archived it?" "I would need to review the internal file trail." Warren said, "The origin is less important than the fact that Marla was considering alternatives." Harlan looked up. "Unsigned drafts do not override executed estate plans." Warren's smile thinned. "Unless the executed plan was signed under undue influence." There it was, the real weapon, not a draft, a suggestion that grief could become a courtroom. Nolan leaned in. "You see, this is what I'm talking about. Dad was the gatekeeper. He kept saying she was exhausted. He told people not to come." "She was exhausted," I said. "How convenient. She was dying." "So were you protecting her, or protecting access?" That question landed harder than it should have, because the ugliest accusations are the ones that borrow a little truth to carry a lie. I had told people not to come. Some days, Marla could barely sit up. Some days, pain turned sound into knives. Some days, she asked me to keep the room quiet. So I did. And now, they were taking that mercy and calling it control. Harlan's voice cut through the room. "Mrs. Kingsley Jones anticipated this issue." Warren blinked. "She what?" Harlan opened another section of the blue binder, but not the sealed envelope. Not yet. "The final estate plan was signed after a 90-day review period. Mrs. Kingsley Jones met with independent counsel without Curtis present. She completed a medical capacity evaluation. The signing was video recorded. 2 witnesses were present, neither selected by Curtis." Nolan's expression shifted. Not belief, frustration. He wanted a simple villain, and Harlan had just made the paper complicated. Warren recovered first. "A capacity evaluation does not erase emotional dependence." "No," Harlan said. "But it does matter when someone wants to suggest she was not capable of making her own decision." Dalton adjusted his cuff. A tiny movement. Harlan saw it. So did I. Harlan tapped the draft. "I am going to have this reviewed." Warren's jaw tightened. For what? Template origin, print markings, email trail, file history, anything that tells us whether this was truly an old planning document or a new pressure tool wearing old clothes. Sloane looked at Warren. You told me Aunt Marla had asked for that draft. Warren did not look at her. I said she had considered options. That is not the same thing. No, Harlan said quietly. It is not. For the first time, Sloane looked less afraid of me than of the man beside her. Nolan pushed his chair back. You're all missing the point. Even if the document is real, Dad still wins because he sat there long enough to become necessary. I looked at my son. The anger was gone from his face for a second. Only hurt remained. That made it worse. Nolan, I said, I did not sit beside Marla to become necessary. He laughed, bitter and low. No, you only learned how to stay after it stopped being my mother who needed you. The room went quiet again. That sentence did not belong in an estate meeting. It belonged in a kitchen 20 years earlier, when I still had time to be a better father. Harlan let the silence breathe, then closed the draft folder. We will not resolve family history today. We will resolve documents. He turned to Dalton. You will preserve every file related to this draft, every email, every print record, every internal note, and every access change connected to the lake house. Dalton's face tightened. Of course. Not of course, Harlan said. Formally. That word made Dalton sit back. Harlan looked at Warren. And if this draft was circulated to create fear, delay, or pressure against the named trustee, that will matter. Warren's voice cooled. You are assuming a great deal. No, Harlan said. I am documenting possibilities. Assumptions are what people use when they lack records. Then he picked up his phone and called someone on speaker. Arlen Knox, he said when the man answered. I need you to review a disputed planning draft. Paper, scan trail, template, printer marks, metadata where available. Warren's face hardened. Arlen's voice came through dry and older. How soon? Immediately. That bad? Harlan looked at the draft. That depends on whether it is a document or theater. I looked at the folder on the table. For a moment, I understood the plan. They did not need the draft to win. They needed it to scare me, to make me doubt Marla, to make me doubt myself, to make the room wonder if love at the end of life had been twisted into control. And the cruelest part was, some part of me wondered too. Harlan looked at the unsigned draft, then at Warren, and said, if this document is honest, we will know. And if it was built to frighten a grieving husband, we will know that too. Harlan set the disputed draft aside. Not gently, not dramatically, just far enough from the blue binder to make a point. Now, he said, we read the instrument that was actually signed. Warren's eyes narrowed. Nolan leaned back like he was preparing to hate every word before it was spoken. Dalton Fay stayed still. Too still. That was the thing about people who worked around money for too long. They learned that movement could look like guilt, so they trained their bodies to become furniture. Harlan opened the blue binder. The room changed. I cannot explain it better than that. The binder was not large. It did not glow. It did not make a sound beyond the soft pull of metal rings and paper. But every person at that table leaned toward it or away from it. No one stayed neutral. On the first page, Marla's handwriting sat above the typed legal language. Not for money, for memory. I had seen those words earlier, but this time they landed differently. Before, they had felt like a message to me. Now, they felt like a warning to everyone else. Harlan put on his reading glasses. Article 1, he said. Statement of intent. Nolan muttered, here we go. Harlan looked at him over the glasses. If you interrupt this section, Mr. Jones, I will begin again from the first word every time. Nolan shut his mouth. For the first time that morning, I almost smiled. Almost. Harlan read in a calm, even voice. I, Marla Kingsley Jones, being of sound mind, clear intent, and independent counsel make this declaration freely and without coercion." Warren folded his hands. Harlan continued, "My estate is not to be treated as proof of who loved me loudly. It is to be placed under the care of the person who stayed when love became work." No one looked at me. That was how I knew they all knew who she meant. Harlan turned the page. "Mrs. Kingsley Jones leaves her personal estate, business interests held in trust, lake house interest, medical real estate voting authority, cold storage equity participation, and foundation transition authority to Curtis Jones, outright and in trust, subject to the stewardship provisions below." Nolan's chair scraped back. "This is insane." Harlan did not stop reading. "Curtis Jones is named sole trustee." Warren finally spoke. "This is exactly why capacity must be reviewed." Harlan lifted another tab from the binder. "It was." He slid several pages forward. "Independent medical capacity evaluation. Separate council conference without Curtis present. Video recorded signing. 90-day review period. 2 witnesses unaffiliated with Curtis Jones. No contest clause acknowledged and explained." Warren's face did not break, but the confidence around his eyes did. Just a little. I sat there with my hands folded, feeling no victory at all. That is the part people may not understand. When someone leaves you power after death, it does not feel like winning. It feels like being handed a lantern in a burning house. My son thought I was waiting for a share. My wife had left me the responsibility for all of it. Before I tell you what was inside that sealed envelope, let me ask you something. If your own child said you deserved nothing because you were not blood, but you were the one who stayed beside your wife when everyone else only asked about papers, would you still stay quiet? Tell me honestly what you would have done." Harlan turned another page. "The trustee shall have full discretionary authority to delay, deny, condition, or suspend distributions to any beneficiary or interested party pending review of misconduct, coercion, misrepresentation, concealment of advances, improper property removal, or attempts to undermine the trustee through false estate documents." Dalton's fingers moved. Only once, but I saw it. So did Harlan. Nolan looked from Harlan to me. "So he gets to judge us now?" I did not answer quickly. When I did, my voice sounded older than I wanted it to. "No, Nolan. Marla's records do." That hurt him. I saw it. Not because he loved Marla enough to care what she recorded, but because he hated that I had not begged for the power he thought I wanted. Warren leaned forward. "This is a hostile takeover of a family legacy." Harlan closed one hand on the binder. "No, it is a trust instrument signed by a competent adult. Marla was ill. Yes. She was dependent. She was loved. That is not a legal answer." Harlan's eyes cooled. "No, Mr. Kingsley. It is a human one. The legal answer is in the pages I just summarized." Sloane sat with both hands clasped in her lap. Her face looked different now, less certain. "Aunt Marla really planned all of this?" Harlan looked at her, and his voice softened. "She planned for behavior, Sloane, not drama." That sentence moved through the room like a door opening in the dark. Then Harlan reached into the binder's back pocket. The sealed envelope came out. Cream paper. Marla's handwriting. "Open only if they humiliate Curtis." Nobody breathed. Harlan placed it flat on the table. "This envelope has been triggered by the statements made in this room and at the prior gathering." Nolan's face hardened. "Oh, come on." Harlan ignored him. However, Mrs. Kingsley Jones included a second instruction. If the challenge extended beyond personal insult into claims of undue influence, control of foundation assets, family office conduct, or disputed planning documents, this envelope is to be read into the foundation record. Warren went still. That was different from calm. Calm rests. Stillness hides. Harlan looked from Warren to Dalton. Given the circulated draft amendment, the Lake House access change, and the intent to challenge Curtis's authority, that condition appears to be met. And Dalton cleared his throat. "With respect, The family office has ordinary procedures for preservation. Harlan turned to him. Including the advance loans? Dalton's mouth closed. Nolan looked at him too quickly. There it was again, a glance that tried to run and left footprints. Harlan slid a formal notice across the table. The audit clause is now active. All distribution requests, reimbursements, advances, consulting fees, property removals, and access changes from the past 7 years are subject to review. Dalton stared at the notice. For the first time, he looked less like furniture and more like a man sitting in a chair he had built too close to a fire. Warren said, "You are escalating this unnecessarily." Harlan's voice stayed level. "No. Your side escalated it when a grieving husband was locked out of a home and presented with an unsigned draft as though it carried the weight of a signed estate plan." I looked at the envelope. I wanted it opened. I feared it too. Because when the dead defend you, it means they expected you would be attacked. And I hated that Marla had spent any of her final strength preparing for this table. Harlan placed his hand lightly over the envelope. "Before this is read into the Foundation record, everyone in this room should understand one thing." He looked at Nolan, then Warren, then Dalton. Mrs. Kingsley Jones did not forget anyone. His fingers tapped the blue binder once. She documented everyone. Harlan placed the sealed envelope on the table and said, "Before I open this, everyone should understand. The audit clause is now active." And that was when Dalton Fay finally stopped looking bored. Harlan placed the sealed envelope back inside the blue binder. Not away, not hidden. Just waiting. That was worse. A closed envelope can be louder than an open argument when everyone in the room knows it was written by a dead woman who saw too much. Dalton Fay stared at the audit notice as if it had insulted him personally. Nolan looked between Dalton and Warren, trying to understand which one had just made his own future more dangerous. Warren remained composed. But composition is not peace. Sometimes it is just panic wearing cufflinks. Harlan turned another tab in the binder. "Before any envelope is read into the Foundation record, everyone needs to understand the trustee authority Mrs. Kingsley Jones created." Warren said, "We understand enough." "No," Harlan replied. "You understand inheritance as possession. Marla wrote this as stewardship." That word changed the air. Stewardship. It did not sound like money. It sounded like work. Harlan read the next section slowly. "Curtis Jones shall have full authority to preserve, manage, restructure, retain, or dispose of estate assets when such action serves the long-term purpose of the trust, the foundation, and Mrs. Kingsley Jones's stated intent." Nolan laughed once. "So Dad gets to play king." I looked at him. No. He stared at me, waiting for a fight. I did not give him one. Kings spend what they want. Trustees answer for what they protect. He looked away. Not because he agreed, because he had no fast answer. Harlan continued, "Immediate distributions are not guaranteed. All distributions may be delayed, conditioned, or denied pending review of prior advances, concealed obligations, coercion, misrepresentation, improper pressure, or conduct harmful to the estate." Dalton shifted again. This time, even Sloane noticed. She looked out at him, then at Warren. Something in her face moved from confusion toward fear. Warren leaned forward. "This is exactly the danger. Curtis now has personal grievances and unrestricted discretion." Harlan looked at him over the binder. "Restricted by fiduciary duty, court oversight, if abused, written terms, documented intent, and the audit mechanism your side has now triggered." Warren's mouth tightened. He did not like being corrected in front of people he expected to command. Harlan slid a page toward me. "Curtis, as trustee, you may appoint a forensic accountant." I did not touch the paper right away. The word forensic sounded like a body had been found. In a way, one had. Not Marla's, the estate's, the thing they had been cutting into while calling it legacy. Harlan said, "You may also suspend family office authority during the audit." Dalton spoke quickly. "That would create unnecessary disruption." Harlan turned. "For whom?" "For operations." "What operations?" Dalton paused. The usual reimbursements, scheduled advances, property maintenance, charitable administration, consulting fees? Harlan asked. Dalton stopped. Nolan looked down. Warren's eyes moved, just once, toward Dalton. Tiny. But I had spent a career reading tiny. I said, "There are consulting fees?" Warren answered before Dalton could. "Large estates require planning." "Before the person dies?" Warren's voice cooled. "Responsible families plan transitions." I looked at him. Responsible families do not change locks before the will is read. Sloane lowered her eyes. That one landed near her, too. Harlan read on. "The trustee may restore access to any property removed, restricted, or reclassified without written authority from the trust or council." I thought of the lake house, the red light on the keypad, the green chair behind glass, Marla's blanket. For the first time since standing on that porch, I felt the door move back toward me, not open yet, but no longer theirs to hold shut. Nolan pushed back from the table. "So what happens now? He freezes everyone, opens our bank accounts, decides who behaved nicely enough to eat?" "Nolan," Harlan said, "this is not about behavior being nice. It is about transactions being honest. My finances are none of his business. If they intersect with Marla's estate, advances, or family office records, they are very much the trustee's business." Nolan's face changed. There it was. Fear. Not grief, not anger. Fear. I said his name quietly. "Nolan, don't. I have not asked for your records. Not yet. No, not yet." He stared at me like I had betrayed him by not promising protection. That is the strange thing about people who attack you. They still expect your mercy to arrive on schedule. Warren seized the opening. "This is why we cannot accept Curtis as neutral. There are emotional conflicts everywhere." Harlan closed one section of the binder. "Marla did not choose a neutral person. She chose a loyal one." Warren smiled thinly. "Loyalty is not a qualification." "It was to her." The room went quiet. Sloane's voice came small from the end of the table. "Why would she not tell us?" Harlan looked at her gently. "Some of this she did. You may not have heard it as instruction because Warren called it illness, and Nolan called it dependence." Sloane flinched. Warren said, "Careful." Harlan did not look away. "I am being careful." Then he pulled a smaller page from the binder. Mrs. Kingsley Jones wrote a supplemental note about the lake house. My hand tightened on the arm of the chair. Harlan read, "The lake house is not inventory. It is not to be used as a bargaining chip, staging asset, or symbolic proof of Kingsley control. Curtis knows which chair faces the morning light. That is enough." I had to look down, because grief can behave like water. You think the room is dry. Then one sentence opens a crack. Nolan saw my face and looked away quickly. Maybe he did not want to see proof that I had loved her. Maybe he was afraid it would make his hatred less clean. Warren said nothing. Harlan folded the note back. "Curtis, under the terms, you may direct access restoration immediately." I swallowed. "Do it." Dalton cleared his throat. "I will notify security." "No," Harlan said. "My office will notify security. The family office will preserve its communications." Dalton sat back. That was the first real blow to his role. Not loud, not dramatic, but authority had changed hands. Harlan continued, "Any pending distributions to Nolan Jones, Warren Kingsley, related entities, or advisory contractors may be placed on administrative hold pending audit." Nolan stood. "You cannot lump me in with him." He pointed at Warren. Warren finally lost a little of his calm. "Sit down, Nolan." "No. You told me this would make things fair." The sentence escaped before he could catch it. Everyone heard it. Harlan's eyes sharpened. "What did Mr. Kingsley tell you would make things fair?" Nolan's face went red. Warren said, "This is becoming unproductive." I looked at my son. "Nolan." He shook his head. "You don't get to use that voice now." "What did he promise you?" Nolan laughed bitterly. "Nothing you would understand." But I understood enough. Nolan did not have Marla's blood. What he had was resentment debt, and Warren's promise that if Curtis fell, everyone who helped would be remembered. Harlan made a note. Warren watched the pen move like it was cutting him. Sloane whispered, "Warren, what did you do?" He turned to her. "I protected what Marla built." "No," I said. My voice surprised even me. "You protected your access to it." For once, Warren's expression cracked, only for a heartbeat. But I saw the man underneath. Not grieving, not righteous, afraid of becoming ordinary, afraid that without Marla's name, he was just another man with nice shoes and a hollow claim. Harlan closed the binder partway. "If you still intend to contest Curtis's appointment, then the sealed envelope will be read into the Foundation record. That means board members, minutes, and counsel present." Warren said, "You would turn private grief into public theater?" Harlan looked at him. "No. Marla gave private grief a public defense in case someone tried to weaponize it." Nobody spoke. Even Nolan sat back down. I looked at the blue binder, at Marla's handwriting, at the envelope waiting inside like a final breath she had saved for me. I did not feel powerful. I felt chosen for a job I wished did not exist. But for the first time, I understood the shape of what she had done. Marla had not left me $60 million so I could win a fight. She had left me the keys to stop one. Harlan closed the binder and said, "If you still intend to challenge Curtis, then Marla's sealed envelope must be read into the Foundation record." For the first time, Warren looked less angry than afraid. The meeting ended without ending anything. That is how legal battles work. People stand up, gather papers, close folders, and pretend the room has finished speaking. But the real words follow you into the hallway. I stepped out of Harlan Tate's office with the blue binder still inside my mind, like a weight I could not set down. Sole trustee, audit clause, suspended distributions, Foundation record. Those were legal words, heavy words, but none of them felt as heavy as my son's face when he realized Marla's records might reach him too. Nolan followed me into the parking lot. I heard his shoes behind me before he said my name. "Dad." I stopped. The air was cold enough to make breath visible. For a moment, we stood there like two men who had shared a last name longer than we had shared a table. He looked angry, but anger was only the coat. Underneath, I saw the boy again, the one I had failed in quieter ways than any courtroom could measure. "You sat beside her bed for months," he said. I did not answer. He stepped closer. "Where was that man when Mom was breaking down and I was 12? There it was. Not estate law, not bloodline, not trustee authority. A kitchen table from 30 years ago. A boy waiting for a father who kept sending checks instead of himself. "Nolan!" "No, don't say my name like that." "Like what?" "Like you're sorry in a way that costs you nothing." That one hurt, because it had teeth. He kept going, voice shaking now. "You know what I remember? Mom crying over bills. You missing weekends, you calling late and saying work got complicated. Then you marry Marla, and suddenly you become a saint with a medicine schedule." I looked down. There are accusations a man can deny. And then there are the ones that stand too close to truth. "I sent money," I said. The second it left my mouth, I hated it. Nolan laughed, not loud, worse, tired. "Money. That was always your proof." He pointed toward the building. "Now look at you, trustee, widower, loyal husband, the man who stayed. Everybody gets to cry over how noble Curtis Jones became." His voice broke on my name. "You were never that patient with us." I closed my eyes for a second. "I know." He blinked. That was not the answer he expected. Maybe he wanted me to defend myself. Maybe he needed me to. A fight would have been easier than what I gave him. "I failed you in ways money never fixed," I said. His jaw tightened. Convenient time to admit it. I should have admitted it sooner. "Before $60 million made you honest?" I looked at him then. Really looked. Nolan was 45, but grief and debt and resentment had made him look older in the eyes. He had dressed like success, but pain was leaking through the seams. "You think this is about money?" I said. "No," he snapped. "I think it's about you finally getting rewarded for showing up to the right woman." The sentence landed between us, cold, ugly, almost true in the way only a wounded child can make a lie feel earned. For one terrible moment, I wondered if my son was wrong about the estate, but right about me. Maybe I had become better too late. Maybe Marla received the patient man Nolan needed first. Maybe loyalty, even real loyalty, could not erase an absence that taught a child to hate needing you. I said, "Your pain is real." He looked away. "But it does not make Warren honest." His eyes came back fast. "Don't put this on Warren." "I'm not. You always do that. You make other people the problem so you can stay calm." I almost answered sharply. I almost told him that calm was the only thing keeping this family from burning down in public. But I stopped, because that would have been another way to win the sentence and lose the son. So I said, "What did he promise you?" Nolan's face changed. Small, but enough. "No one promised me anything." "That is not what your eyes said in there." He stepped back. "You don't know me. I know when a man is afraid of an audit." His mouth opened, closed. Then Warren's voice came from behind us. "This is exactly why Curtis cannot manage the estate objectively." I turned. Warren Kingsley stood near the office entrance, coat buttoned, expression composed. He had not come out to comfort anyone. He had come out because he smelled opportunity. Nolan's hurt had become useful to him. That made me angrier than Nolan's words ever could. Warren walked toward us. Family conflict, emotional guilt, prior parental abandonment. These are not minor issues. I stared at him. You just heard a son bleeding and reached for a legal pad. His face hardened. I am protecting Marla's legacy. "No," I said. "You are collecting weapons." For once, Warren's polished mask slipped. Only a fraction. But I saw it. He did not like being seen in plain language. Before he could answer, Harlan opened the office door. Behind him stood Dalton Fay, holding that old leather briefcase with both hands. Dalton had not been outside when the argument began, which meant Harlan had called him back, or stopped him from leaving. Either way, his face had lost its furniture look. Harlan said, "Mr. Fay, please repeat what you just told me." Dalton swallowed. I said, "I prepared what Mr. Kingsley requested." Warren turned slowly. "Dalton." The name came out like a warning. Harlan stepped down one stair. "Prepared what?" Dalton adjusted his grip on the briefcase. "The draft packet, based on prior planning language and materials in the family office archive." Sloane appeared behind Harlan, pale. "You told me Aunt Marla asked for that draft." Warren did not look at her. "I told you there were discussions." "No," Sloane said. "You let me believe Curtis had hidden something." The air changed. Nolan looked at Warren now. Really looked. That was the first time I saw doubt enter my son from another door. Harlan held out his hand. "The briefcase." Dalton hesitated. "Counsel should review." "I am counsel for the estate instrument at issue," Harlan said. "And until this is sorted, preservation obligations apply." Dalton gave him the briefcase, slowly, like it had weight beyond paper. Harlan did not open it there. He only held it and looked at Warren. "Tomorrow," he said, "we meet at the foundation board. The sealed envelope will be read into the record. Arlen Knox will review the disputed draft. Mr. Fay will produce the family office logs. Everyone will have a chance to tell the truth before the records do it for them." Warren's voice was low. "You are escalating beyond necessity." Harlan answered, "No, I am catching up to the escalation already attempted." Nolan looked at me. His anger had not disappeared. Neither had mine. But for the first time, the shape of the room was changing. He had come out to wound me, and Warren had tried to turn that wound into evidence. Even Nolan could feel the difference. I said to my son, "I was not the father you deserved." His face tightened. "But do not let a man use that pain to make you help him steal from a dead woman." He did not answer. Maybe he could not. Harlan looked at Warren, then at Dalton's locked briefcase, and said, "Tomorrow, bring the draft, the logs, and whatever version of the truth you are prepared to defend." The Foundation boardroom still smelled like Marla, not perfume. She never liked perfume in business rooms. It smelled like cedar shelves, old paper, strong coffee, and the kind of quiet that made people sit straighter without being asked. Her photograph hung on the wall near the long table. Marla in that navy coat again, one hand on the lake house railing. A woman who looked like she could forgive you, but only after you told the truth. Harlan Tate placed the blue binder in front of him. Beside it sat Dalton Fay's briefcase. Across the table, Warren Kingsley looked composed again, but now I understood his calm better. It was not confidence. It was calculation. Sloane sat far from him this time. That said something. Nolan sat near the window, arms folded, eyes tired. He had not apologized to me. I had not expected him to. Some wounds do not become gentle overnight, just because another man turns out to be worse. Harlan opened the meeting. This record is being made for the Foundation Board, Estate Council, and Trust Administration purposes. We are not here to decide who grieved properly. We are here to review what Mrs. Kingsley Jones documented. Warren leaned forward. We are here because there are serious concerns about influence. Harlan looked at him. Then we will begin with the document Marla instructed me to open if Curtis was publicly humiliated, accused of fortune-seeking, or challenged through bloodline rhetoric. Nolan looked down. He knew his words had opened that door. Harlan lifted the sealed envelope. Cream paper, Marla's handwriting. Open only if they humiliate Curtis. My chest tightened. I wanted to hear her. I was afraid to hear her. That is grief. It gives you hunger and fear for the same voice. Harlan broke the seal. Inside were 4 things: a handwritten letter, a small USB drive, a copy of a hospice visitor log, and a note in Marla's sharp handwriting. If they produce an unsigned draft, ask who printed it. Warren's face did not move, but his throat did. Harlan inserted the USB into the boardroom screen. For a second, there was only a blue loading circle. Then Marla appeared, thin, wrapped in a gray shawl, sitting in the library at the lake house. Her voice was softer than I remembered, but her eyes were all there. "If this is being opened," she said, "then someone mistook my illness for blindness." No one breathed, not even Nolan. Marla looked directly into the camera. Nolan will say blood. Warren will say legacy. Sloane may not know what to believe. Curtis will probably say nothing because he has always mistaken silence for dignity. Her mouth curved just a little. So, I am speaking for the part of him he never defends. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. I hated that everyone could see it. I loved that Marla still knew me well enough to name the thing I would not. She continued, "Curtis did not ask me for the lake house. He did not ask me for accounts, passwords, distributions, or voting rights. He asked whether the blanket was too heavy. He asked whether the tea was too hot. He asked whether I wanted the window open even when it was snowing outside and he thought I was being unreasonable." A faint smile. I was being unreasonable. He opened it anyway. Sloane covered her mouth. Nolan looked away. Warren stared at the screen like a man trying to intimidate a ghost. Marla's voice grew firmer. "Money tells you who is impressed by you. Illness tells you who is willing to sit beside you when there is nothing left to perform." The video ended there. Not with music, not with drama. Just Marla looking tired and certain. Harlan let the silence sit. Then he lifted the hospice log. Miles Abbott is present by video to confirm the authenticity of the visitor log. The screen changed to a man in a plain office, gray-haired, serious. Miles said, "Mrs. Kingsley Jones requested visitor pattern documentation during her final care period." Nolan snapped, "So grief has attendance sheets now?" Miles did not flinch. "No. But when a patient asks us to document who comes for comfort and who comes with folders, we document." That one landed hard. Harlan read carefully. Curtis Jones, present repeatedly, including overnight care periods. Autumn Greer, attending nurse notes. Spouse assisted with medication schedule, meals, blanket adjustment, reading, and nausea episodes. Sloane Kingsley, several visits. Personal conversation. No documented financial requests. Nolan Jones, 3 visits. 2 included questions about document access, estate timing, and administrative contacts. Nolan stood halfway. "That is not fair." Harlan looked at him. "Records are rarely fair. They are usually specific." Nolan sat down again. His face was red, but not only with anger. Warren's name came next. Warren Kingsley, multiple visits, several accompanied by portfolio materials, proposed transition notes, and family office summaries. Then Dalton Fay, present for one financial review. Patient requested follow-up note regarding pressure to prepare the family structure before I am gone. Sloane turned slowly toward Warren. "You told me she wanted that." Warren's answer came too fast. "She did want the family protected." Harlan picked up the unsigned draft. "Arlen Knox has reviewed the draft packet." Arlen appeared on the screen next, holding a pair of reading glasses and the face of a man who had spent too many years proving paper could lie. "No single mark proves the whole story," Arlen said, "but the template does not match Harlan Tate's office. The scan header traces to a family office machine. The email attachment date is later than the planning period claimed. There is no witness trail, no legal memo, and no signature. The paper stock is newer than the archive label suggests." He paused. "This draft was made to look old. The printer marks say otherwise." Dalton closed his eyes, only for a second, but it was enough. Harlan turned to him. "Who requested the packet?" Dalton swallowed. "I prepared what Mr. Kingsley requested." Warren's head turned. "Dalton!" There was a warning in his voice, but warnings work best before the room already knows where to look. Sloane pushed back from the table. "You said Aunt Marla was reconsidering." "She was," Warren said. Harlan opened Marla's letter. Then she anticipated that claim too. He read aloud. "Warren may produce a draft and call it my second thoughts. My second thoughts are in this binder, signed, witnessed, and recorded." The room broke in a way I could feel. Not loud, not chairs flying. Just the quiet collapse of a story people had been using as shelter. Warren's face finally changed. The polished grief was gone. Underneath was fear, and anger, and something smaller than both. Exposure. I looked at Nolan. He was staring at Warren now, not at me. For the first time since this began, my son was seeing another man use pain the way he had used it, as leverage. Harlan held up the unsigned draft. "This was not Marla's second thought," he said. "It was someone else's first move." Harlan held up the unsigned draft. "This was not Marla's second thought," he said. "It was someone else's first move." No one rushed to answer. That was how I knew the sentence had found its target. Warren Kingsley sat very still, hands folded on the table, as if good posture could protect him from evidence. Dalton Fay looked older than he had looked the day before. Nolan stared at the draft packet like it had betrayed him personally. Maybe it had. Not because he was innocent. Because a man can be guilty and still hate discovering he was not the smartest sinner in the room. Harlan turned to the Foundation board members. "Now we move from intent to consequence." Warren's voice came out controlled. "You are treating preliminary administrative work as misconduct." Harlan looked at him. "No, I am treating hidden administrative work, property access changes, unsupported draft circulation, and undocumented family office advances as matters requiring review." Jillian Rowe, who had been silent until then, leaned forward. "Mr. Tate, does the Foundation need to suspend activity?" "No," Harlan said. "Marla anticipated that too. The charitable work continues. The audit concerns family distributions, reimbursements, advisory payments, property handling, and related party transactions." That was Marla. Even after death, she had built a wall between her family's greed and the patients her foundation served. Harlan opened another section of the binder. Capacity safeguards first. He placed the pages in order. Medical evaluation, independent counsel memo, video signing certificate, witness statement, 90-day review period. Curtis not present. Each page landed on the table with a quiet finality. Warren said, "A sick person can still become emotionally dependent." "Yes," Harlan said. "That is why she met counsel without Curtis in the room." Sloan looked at the video still on the screen, Marla's face frozen in mid-sentence. "She knew we would question him." Harlan nodded. "She knew some of you would question anyone who stood between you and immediate access." Dalton cleared his throat. "That is an unfair characterization." Harlan turned to him. "Then the records will correct me." He pulled out the audit notice again. "Effective immediately, all pending payouts, reimbursements, consulting fees, advisory retainers, property removals, and advances tied to Nolan Jones, Warren Kingsley, Dalton Fay, or related entities are on administrative hold pending review." Nolan stood up. "You can't just freeze my life." I looked at him. "No, but Marla's estate will no longer thaw your debts without asking why they froze in the first place." His face twisted. "I needed help." "Then ask for help," I said. "Don't dress need as entitlement." That hit him harder than I expected. For 1 second, he looked 12 again. Then he sat down. Harlan continued. "The preliminary records show several temporary advances issued to Mr. Nolan Jones through family office channels." Nolan closed his eyes. Warren looked away. Dalton looked at the table. Harlan did not read every number. He had that mercy, or maybe that strategy. A few details are sometimes more damning than a full list. Some were coded as personal liquidity bridges. Others were attached to vague consulting language. Jillian asked, "Was Nolan a consultant?" No one answered. That answer was enough. Then Harlan turned to Warren. "Mr. Kingsley received transition planning payments before Mrs. Kingsley Jones passed." Warren said, "The family needed continuity." Sloane's voice shook. "You were charging the office while telling me Curtis was the danger?" Warren faced her. "I was protecting the family." She shook her head. "No, you were protecting control." That sentence did what the documents had not. It made Warren look small. For the first time, I saw him without the last name, without the smooth language, without Marla's shadow behind him. Just a man terrified that legacy might continue without his hand around its throat. Harlan then addressed Dalton. "Mr. Fay, pending review, your authority within the family office is suspended. You will preserve all files, emails, access logs, payment records, property inventories, and draft correspondence." Dalton swallowed. "Understood." "No," Harlan said. "I need more than understood. I need compliance." Dalton nodded once. "Compliance." The board secretary wrote it down. That sound, pen-scratching paper, felt louder than any shouting could have. Warren leaned toward me. "You realize what you are doing, Curtis? You are breaking what Marla built." I looked at him for a long moment. "No. I am stopping you from calling the breakage tradition." He flinched. "Not much. Enough." I stood then, slowly. At 72, standing up can become its own kind of statement. "I did not come here to punish grief," I said. "I know grief makes people selfish. I know fear makes people reach for control. I know guilt can wear expensive clothes and call itself duty." I looked at Nolan, then Warren, then Dalton. But grief did not change locks. Grief did not print drafts. Grief did not hide advances. Grief did not turn my marriage into an accusation. The boardroom went completely still. I placed my hand on the blue binder. Marla left me responsibility. I will use it. Then I gave the terms. The 7-year audit would begin immediately. All distributions to Nolan, Warren, and related parties would remain suspended until records were reviewed. Any undocumented advances would require disclosure and repayment planning before future consideration. Lake House access would be restored to me as trustee. Any removed or labeled property would be returned or accounted for. Warren's transition committee proposal was withdrawn. Dalton was suspended pending review. The Foundation mission would continue without interruption, and the board minutes would reflect the truth. Jillian looked up. "What truth, Mr. Jones?" I looked at Marla's photograph, then at the people still trying to decide whether I had become powerful or simply inconvenient. That Marla appointed me because of documented trust, caregiving, and stewardship, not manipulation. No one spoke. Sloane raised her hand first. "I support that language." Jillian nodded. "So do I." Warren said nothing. Nolan looked at me, anger still there, but cracked now by something more dangerous to him than anger: understanding. Finally, he said, "So, you win." I almost laughed, but there was no humor left in the room. "No, Nolan," I said. "Marla is dead. Nobody wins. We only decide how much more truth we are willing to bury with her." He looked down. That was the closest thing to silence I'd ever received from my son that did not feel like punishment. Harlan closed the blue binder halfway. The meeting moved into procedure after that. Signatures, notices, preservation orders, board minutes. The boring machinery of consequence. But near the end, I saw one more thing inside the binder. A photograph of Marla at the lake house, wrapped in her gray shawl, smiling toward someone outside the frame. Probably me. Beneath the photograph, she had written, "Do not let them confuse my fortune with my life." I touched the edge of the page, not the ink, just the paper, and finally understood what she had really left me to protect. The audit began 2 weeks later, not with shouting, not with cameras, just accountants, folders, locked access logs, and the slow sound of truth being pulled from places people thought paperwork could hide it. Dalton Fay was suspended from the family office. Warren Kingsley withdrew his transition committee proposal, though he did it through an email so cold it could have preserved meat. The lake house access was restored to me. The boxes marked for appraisal were returned. Every pending distribution tied to Warren, Nolan, and related accounts was placed on hold until the audit could show what had been borrowed, hidden, renamed, or excused. I did not destroy the family. Marla would not have wanted that. But I did stop letting the family destroy the truth. That is a different thing. Nolan came to the lake house one gray afternoon. He did not walk in like he owned it. He stood on the porch and waited. That mattered. When I opened the door, he looked past me at the chair by the window, the gray blanket, the little table where Marla used to keep her tea. For a while, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "I hated you before Marla." I nodded. "The money just gave me a cleaner excuse," he said. That was the first honest thing my son had offered me in years. I did not hug him, not yet. Some wounds need respect before comfort. "I failed you before Marla," I told him. "That does not make what you did honest." He looked down. I know. Maybe he did. Maybe he was only beginning to. So I gave him the only path I could give without lying. If you want a future distribution, you start with the audit. If you want a father, you start with the truth. He did not answer, but he stayed on the porch longer than I expected. A few days later, Sloane came to the foundation office. She cried when she apologized. "I loved her," she said. "I let Warren convince me your love threatened mine." I told her, "Love is not a room with one chair." She helped us rebuild the foundation after that, quietly, properly, the way Marla would have liked, and that was how the Marla Jones Quiet Care Fund was born. I used the authority Marla left me to create a fund for people who are almost never thanked properly. Older caregivers, second husbands, second wives, partners who sit through chemo, hospice, paperwork, sleepless nights, and family suspicion. People who become essential while their loved one is alive, then become inconvenient when the estate opens. The fund helped pay for legal planning, hospice support, capacity evaluations, caregiver grants, and simple education about documents families avoid until grief turns them into weapons. Because here is what I learned. Estate planning is not just about who gets the house. It is about protecting the truth when the person who knows it best is no longer in the room. Blood matters. Of course it does. But blood alone does not prove loyalty. A last name can get you a seat at the table. It cannot prove you stayed beside the bed. One evening, I returned to the lake house alone. The code worked. That small green light nearly broke me. I walked inside and did not touch the art, the silver, or the files. I sat in Marla's chair. The lake was quiet. The blue binder rested on the table beside her gray blanket. On the cover, her words still waited for me, not for money, for memory. My son thought my wife's estate was about blood. Warren thought it was about legacy. Dalton thought it was about ledgers, but Marla knew better. An estate is not only what someone leaves behind. Sometimes, it is the last way they protect the person who stayed. The revenge was not that I inherited all. The revenge was that Marla made sure they could no longer call loyalty an accident. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and for listening to my story all the way through. Please tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and what time it is where you live right now. If this story moved you even a little, please don't forget to subscribe to Final Act Revenge. Another story is waiting for you on your screen right now. YouTube believes you may enjoy it.